Y'all, I cannot believe that it is already 2023 and that we're pretty much at the end of January. Like, what the fuck happened and where did it go? I can't believe that we have completed a panini. We are here in the year of the Jetson. Things are still a shit show. Expectations are rising, and as if that wasn't enough, we are on the cusp of a supposed economic downturn. And after several thousand layoffs from across corporate America, I think we can all say that it is a little rocky out there. So, with that all being said, this year I actually am focusing my time and efforts on doing less. So, it's a wild one considering that everybody right now is doing the most to keep their jobs, but I'm out here trying to focus on doing less. So, like a lot of people in 2022, I had a pretty intense and difficult year. In Q1, a company that I was working for at the time tried to fire me, which was super fun and an awesome time. They were unsuccessful, just to throw that out there, but it was extremely difficult on me that they tried to fire me and I didn't appreciate or feel valued as anyone would. So that was a really hard time for me in trying to find a new job when I hadn't anticipated on having to find one after having been with the company for 5 years. Just to start off in 2022, I had such a hard time at the beginning of the year not feeling like complete utter shit about myself based off of how my company was treating me, which I'm sure we've all had to reconcile our self-esteem, our self-value with our productivity or our jobs. And so that was my opportunity to really start that internal work and separate, my self-value from the work that I was producing for a company. Company tried to fire me, unsuccessful, but because they did attempt to fire me, I did start to look for a different job. I was able to land at another similar style company. The interview process, the onboarding, all of it, the start for the first 3 to 6 months of being at my new company were all very difficult, and I was extremely burnt out, like so many of us are. If you feel like you're burnt out, let me know in the comments because I totally can relate. So many people are burnt out. I just was so overwhelmed already starting into my new job. So here towards the middle of the year, I was seriously having breakdowns at work. I was crying. It was not cute. On top of all of that, I also have suffered from chronic health concerns. So I have endometriosis, PCOS, major depression, chronic depression, any of these variations. I have suffered from generalized anxiety, in addition to being autistic on the autism spectrum. So I'm sure a lot of people can relate to being this kind of diseased or unhealthy version of themselves. But last year it was a lot, and I had a lot of culmination of my various health concerns kind of pop up, in addition to being highly stressed from my corporate job and then not feeling the best in my body. I just was heading into the fall and winter in a really dark place, no pun intended. It was hard, right? I think a lot of people could relate that 2022 and before have been very difficult. We have been in a global pandemic. That's been insane. None of us have experienced that before. And then in addition, our jobs did not slow down. Nobody held any compassion for us that we were going through a global pandemic. Everybody just expected everybody to continue pushing through. And I have to say, coming out 3 years later, I am more tired than I have ever been in my entire life. Right now, I feel a little bit better than I did last year, and we'll talk about why, but it's been difficult, and I think a lot of people would agree to that. There's just so much pressure right now. It's crazy. We come out of this pandemic, and it's still just so high of an expectation, and it's wild to me because I would have thought that we would have recognized how burnt out people are 3 years later, and nobody seems to care, but of course, capitalism, making a profit, all those good things. But it's just outrageous to me that we would put this expectation on people at work that they need to be adaptable, they need to be positive, they need to be team collaborators, they need to be agreeable, they need to be on top of all of their things and healthy and social and all this other components. And that's just at work, and that's for the 40 to 60 hours a week that they want us to be there, even though they're not paying us for that. And then in addition to that, we still have to turn around and be these people outside of work, right? We still have families and kids and friends and social gatherings that we want to join, fit in our own wellness. We want to go to our routine health exams. We want to have time for self-development. If we want to get another degree, if we want to do professional certifications or self-development certifications, maybe we're doing the internal self-work, seeing a therapist, doing any of these things. And it's just so much on top of our 40 to 60 hours a week, plus our family, plus, God forbid, you want to have a hobby and be a well-rounded individual. There is just such a high amount of expectation for us to be these highly successful people. And the thing is, who the fuck is doing this? Do you feel like you're one of those people? Do you feel like you have a handle on all of these different components that are existing for us as workers and people of society, because I would argue that there is not anybody out there that is able to do this by themselves and be 100% successful. It's too much work for a single person to do, and it is an outrageous expectation that we're able to accomplish all of these different components of life and do them at 100% all the time. It's just not sustainable. You know, many of us would call out that people are not doing this by themselves, right? Like those who are able to accomplish all of these things, who look like they have the perfect life on social media or in the office or on Teams, I would argue that they have a major support network behind them that is assisting them with this. And that's no knock or shade against people who have these support networks. I believe I'm one of those support networks. I have one. I don't do all of the things behind the scenes for myself so that I am this successful corporate person. I have a network and I leverage them as I need to. Unfortunately, I think the media shows us, and what we see as portrayed in society at a high level, are that people are pulling themselves up by the bootstraps. They're doing it themselves. They've got it all under control and they're living their best lives. And I just don't believe it to be true. It's definitely some fake social media marketing. Question to those that are watching: why do we do this to ourselves? Why do you think we do this to ourselves? You know, drop me a comment. Let me know. Why do you think we feel like we need to be everywhere all the time, doing everything constantly? Because I find that it's not sustainable, it's unhealthy, and most people aren't happy about it. In fact, story time with Dee. I run a sister circle. As I was talking to one of my sister circle gatherers, she was explaining to us all the things that she had upcoming on her plate, right? So this is like the middle of the year last year. We're checking in. We're, seeing what people have going on, kind of what they've got going for the rest of the year. I'm sure many of you probably do like a mid-year check-in for goals. And so we were connecting with her, and she was explaining to us all the things that she had coming up for the rest of the year, right? She wanted to plan several events for her affinity groups at work. She had to start preparing for the performance year cycle because she is a colleague who does a lot with that for other colleagues. She had the holiday season coming up and a variety of events that she was doing for that. She had some travel going on. She also had a birthday party that she was planning as a big masquerade ball that she wanted to do. She's planning all these things out. She's telling us she's got a lot going on. She doesn't have a lot of room for flexibility. You know, things just need to work out the way they do, and that she'll be fine. She's got it. She's under control, I'm sure, like many of us do. It was a ton, though. When I tell you it was a ton, we called it out to her as a group. We were like, all right, friend, like, do you really need to do all of this right now? And I think that speaks to a lot of us. Do we always need to do the most at that time? But she pushed back. She said, yes, she needed to do these things right then and right there. So I'm sure as many of you already know what's coming up. We get into the nitty gritty of it all. We're in the months. She's doing all the events, and then work blows up. Right? Like, she has an insane amount that's dropped on her at the last minute, that always is. And all of a sudden she finds herself now in the fall, in the winter, overwhelmed by what she has put on her plate. As she talks to us about this, she's telling us that she's feeling stressed, she's got anxiety, she's overwhelmed, she's frustrated, all these negative emotions that she doesn't want to feel, and she feels like she doesn't have the support or capacity to do the things that she decided she wanted to do earlier in the year. Now look, y'all, I'm sure you already know where I'm going to connect the dots, right? We called it out to her in the summer. We said, friend, it's too much. You have too much on your plate. Maybe we need to scale some things back. And she said, no, I've got it. I can handle it. Well, she didn't leave herself any flexibility for things to change. She didn't leave herself any additional space. She didn't corral a support network to help her through this difficult time. She did none of those things. So, of course, she felt overwhelmed, and that makes sense. And I think that speaks to a broader story of what a lot of us do to ourselves. We say we're going to accomplish 15 things on our to-do list. We've got the next 7 months planned out, what have you, all of it. And we don't allow any space to rest, to recuperate, to be flexible, and we feel so strongly that we have to be these individuals, and that in order to be successful, we have to check off all these boxes and we have to do all these components. And I just find that for myself personally, I just end up feeling overworked, right? At the end of the day, when I don't do the proper planning for rest and recuperation, or if I take on too much, and even if somebody flags it to me, the potential I'm taking on too much, which I've had happen and ignore, I just find at the end of it all, I look back and I go, why did I do this to myself? Why did I add on so much to my plate? And what was the point? Was it helpful? Was it necessary? Was it any of these things? And no, oftentimes I found it wasn't necessarily the most beneficial use of my time. And of course, as I found that it wasn't the most beneficial use of my time, I got frustrated even more. And I think what happens then is I'm frustrated, or others may feel this way too. We become frustrated in our lives because work is too overwhelming. We're not happy with that situation. And then it starts to snowball in the rest of our life, right? We start to see these in different components. We start to maybe get a little short with people that we love, our loved ones. We start to maybe not check in as much. We're not as present when we're with them. A variety of things that can take place and ultimately can start to negatively impact our relationships outside of work. And I don't know about you, but that's extremely important to me, that the people I love and care for feel like they're loved and cared for, and I don't talk to them like I think they're trash. Put litter in its place. It's definitely not the emotion I'm trying to give them. So why do we do this? I would love to hear your theories about why do we overwhelm ourselves in this way? Why do we take on more than we're capable of, or more than we should, maybe not even capable of, but why do we take on more than we desire, more than we even want to? Why do we do things we don't desire to do, but somebody has asked us to? When is the last time that you did something for somebody else begrudgingly and you didn't really want to do that? Versus when's the last time you did something for yourself and you really loved it and you felt guilt-free about doing it? Like taking a nap, going to do something creative, hanging out with your friends. When have you done any of these things and not felt guilty about them recently? Because I find myself to often feel guilty that I'm not doing something that's more productive, even though I spend a good portion of my waking day at work being super productive. When did we decide that it was worth it for us to grind ourselves to dust in the name of a company or corporation who, as we're seeing in real time, definitely doesn't give a flying fuck about us? So why don't we prioritize the things we love? And I would call out one of the items is we need money. I know that's one of the big reasons why we do this, but I would love to hear why broadly we're doing it both in our work and our personal lives, that we allow others to dictate what we do with our time. With all that being said, I started this video out and I said, shit was rough, things are hard, I've been struggling, but I'm not gonna do so much this year. So let's get into that. As I became more aware of the different tension I was feeling regarding my job, my life, my abilities, my hobbies, my special interests, everything at all, my entire life, as I took an audit of it, I started to realize that I had a lot of tension between what I wanted to do, how I wanted to spend my time, how I desired to do things versus what I was actually spending my time on, what I was actually doing, and how I felt. It's been a 3-year journey of really taking a look at what I'm doing, spending my time on, how I'm feeling, and taking a full audit of all of that information so that I can better align myself with practices that really feed my soul. So it's been a lot of a journey in rooting myself in these sustainable practices that are long-term, implemented and meant to really help me feel that sense of grounding, that sense of self, sense of accomplishment, achievement, value, all these things that I often looked for my job, but are really within me that I can provide myself, right? I don't need to wait for my job to tell me I'm a kick-ass individual. I could tell myself every day I'm a kick-ass individual and actually believe that. With starting to focus on these sustainable practices in my life, I started to also move away from goal and achievement setting. It became less about me checking off the things that I thought I was supposed to do and more about how did I feel at the end of the day? How did I feel within my body? How do I feel within my job? How do I feel within my relationships? All of those things became way more important to me than just meeting some goal, 6 figures by 30, or being able to be a senior manager by 35. And so I became to understand what my definition of success is. And I think a lot of people, ultimately end up starting that journey when they feel this disconnect from what they spend all day doing and what they desire to do. As I continued to explore these sustainable practices, I actually came across cyclical living last year. So this concept of cyclical living is that we tune into ourselves, we tune into our environments, and we understand what our personal cycles are throughout a day, week, or month, or season, or year, or what have you. So we all go through different cycles. We could talk about how some people are more morning people, some people are more night people, some people are productive in the afternoon, some people are productive in the winter. We're pretty aware, I think, already that people have these cycles and that they often leverage them themselves naturally to kind of accomplish their own work. But this was a mind-blowing concept to me to think about how my cycle as an individual moves throughout a week, a day, a month, a year, and how I could capitalize on those feelings or the natural rhythmic state of myself to work in alignment that would be easier for me instead of constantly pushing against myself to say, I know you don't feel good, but suck it up, buttercup. We got to get shit done. You know, that's not like a super awesome way to have to motivate myself to do things, but that was what I was used to. Instead of paying attention to how I feel on Mondays or Tuesdays or Wednesdays or in the morning versus the afternoon, and then better planning my day around that. As a person that menstruates, I started to track my actual menstrual cycle against my emotions, my physical state, my mental state, my spiritual state, all of those things. And so I've been doing that now for several months, and I have started to see a pattern. But more than what the pattern is that I will absolutely get to in another video is that I have noticed that my natural rhythmic state is not in a collaborative space, is not conducive to the current lifestyle that I'm living. My sleep schedule, I like to biphasic sleep a little bit, which is stupid, is not sustainable for corporate America. I can't just take a 4-hour nap in the middle of the day and expect nobody's going to be bothering me. I learned that my emotional state absolutely is not conducive to working in corporate America. Some days and weeks out of the month, I'm a lot more emotional, and that's okay. My menstrual cycle itself is actually not conducive. I seem to always start when I have the worst work situation going on. And so what I've learned is not only are my natural rhythmic states not conducive for corporate, but in fact, corporate's not really conducive for my natural rhythmic states. So I'm pushing against myself constantly just so that I can be successful in my 9 to 5. And I'm sure that has an immense impact on me because I'm stressed all the time. And so what does that mean? I'm stressed in my body's producing cortisol, it's releasing it constantly, and therefore it's making me sick, it makes me not sleep well, I have anxiety, and I'm just overwhelmed all the time. If I let myself fall into this rut and not focus on how I can better support myself, I end up feeling sick, and it's all the cortisol that's flooding through my body. And I'm sure a lot of us can relate to this, right? I'm sure a lot of you watching this feel stressed. Do you have the Sunday anxieties? Because I definitely have spent a large portion of my corporate career having Sunday anxieties about Monday work again. And it's for not a big reason because the work is ultimately kind of stupid. But here I do. I find myself stressed out Sunday night about what I've got going on for the week ahead. This is just compounding onto us. We're just compounding this stress, this cortisol, this anxiety, all these negative attributes, all these negative feelings. What I started to do after doing a ton of self-development, inner work, as I'm sure all of you are also doing, reading tons of books, I started to really focus on what are my personal cycles, how can I support my personal cycles? And then broadly, how can I support myself better? How can I give myself that love and compassion that I'm looking for externally and just providing it for myself instead? Because I really think it's important that we provide ourselves compassion and love first. And then it should be easier in theory for us to provide it to other people. And I think a lot of us are so good at providing love and compassion already to other people, but we need to be providing it to ourselves. And so I started telling myself that it was okay that I felt like I was suffering. And that's a heavy word. A lot of people won't like to use that. But what I was going through last year and what I still go through sometimes, it feels like suffering. And it's okay that I was telling myself that it's okay to feel like I'm suffering. It's okay that nobody else might feel like this experience is quote unquote suffering. I can provide that comfort to myself. I can tell myself it's okay and validate those feelings. It doesn't change the outward situation, but it has a huge impact on my internal environment. I start to feel a little better, a little lighter. As I was exploring all of the cyclical living, these ideas about having compassion and love for myself in a way that I hadn't explored in the past, I started to really look into this idea about where I was spending my time and was it valuable? Was it the best use of my time? Did it make the most sense to me? And I started to read up on doing less. So there's a few books and articles and podcasts out there that talk about it, but there's a book titled Do Less by Kate Northrup, and I absolutely recommend it. I'll link it in the description. But she really goes into cyclical living, doing less broadly, all these kind of high level topics, and about really understanding what motivates us, what we desire to do, and then why we're doing these things, and if it makes the most sense for us to do them. I don't want to say it's doing less for more. I think we've started to see that narrative on the internet. This is not for productivity goals, right? This is doing less so that I feel more satisfied, that I feel more aligned, that I am feeling more connected to who I am as an individual, and that I don't feel like I'm giving my everything to a company that really doesn't give two shits about me. So it was life-changing, right? And I don't mean to say it so flippantly that it was like life-changing for me. There have been a handful of things that have been life-changing, but I will say one of them was this concept of doing less, and not for being more, not to give more. It was just to do less. And so by doing less, I'm able to start to have the space to breathe and be myself and to feel settled and confident and comfortable in all these things. And I would say, in addition to that, it reminded me that I didn't have to be on all the time. So I think in our current setup, right, between corporate, social media, family, everything else, it feels like we always have to be on. We always need to be presenting some persona or decorum of ourselves out there into the world. And that can be difficult. It can be really tiring. And it can make us feel like we're imposters in our own situations and our own experiences. I really find myself now, looking at how I can be more compassionate, how I can focus on more of the cyclical components of my life. And I think when I start to be a little hard on myself, when I start to be like, oh, you're not being as productive as you can be, or wow, you really didn't hit that deadline that you set for yourself, or you're kind of a trash person on some of this, as I'm sure a lot of us think about ourselves, I, really come back to the idea about like, how would I talk to a friend? Would I tell a friend this? Would I say these things to them? Because I don't think so. I think I would be very compassionate and loving. And so working from that foundation and working from a place of understanding my own cycles, I'm able to really give myself that compassion. And I think because of that, I'm also been able to give that outwards more. So I give it more to my significant other. I give it more to my coworkers. I give it more to my friends and family because I have an abundance of it now that I'm able to share. This is a really high level, right, about like cyclical living and how to do less. I find that these concepts that I'm now working through are really influencing my life for the positive. I'd love to hear, have you heard about this do less? How do you feel about it? What are your thoughts about kind of leading a less productive life, so to speak? Do you find that you resonate with this? I'd love to hear your thoughts below. Please comment. Please let me know. I'll definitely be continuing this conversation about cyclical living, about how to be compassionate with ourselves and all the joys of being a corporate America worker. Yeah, let me know in the comments what you think.